Hey guys, what is going on? It is Brook, or the Undead DM. I'm back at it again with another rant for you today in the car. Apologize, I'm just getting me a drink right now. So some good news. I have just acquired a microphone, so hopefully I can start recording on my desktop a little bit better quality audio. So be excited for that with some audio similar to this, but with gameplay footage. So that should be fun. So I did do a poll recently about whether or not I should do some homebrew review again once I get into the new house, or whenever I get the time to do so. And I did get one or two responses saying that I should just go ahead and do it. It's going to be comparison between 4th edition and what my homebrew is, and what I think homebrew should be with 5th edition, and what you should really strive for. But with that, let's just get right into this rant. Remember, if you like my content, please leave a like, comment, subscribe if you want to see more. And with that, let's just get started. So, here's what I think. I think survival mechanics in 5th edition are inherently busted. What do I mean by this? Well, when you look at survival games, typically what do you think of? You think of things like Minecraft, possibly Don't Starve, possibly, trying to think of another survival game off the top of my head, having a little bit of trouble. But yeah, those are the two that come to mind most prominently are Don't Starve and Minecraft. You typically have hunger and thirst and some kind of sleep mechanic. There is a sleep mechanic in 5th edition. Obviously, everybody knows about the short rest, long rest system, but it's kind of busted in my opinion. So, if you look at a book for 5th edition, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but it's Lord of the Rings inspired. I think it's Adventures in Middle-earth. They had a mechanic in there where you could only long rest in safe spots. So basically, you couldn't long rest outside in like the woods, because it wouldn't be considered a safe area or a sanctuary. Where a sanctuary would be something like a town or a village or something that has people living in it regularly. I found that very interesting, but then there comes up the problem of, well, if a sanctuary is just anywhere with a significant amount of buildings, then what about spells that are designed specifically to be sanctuaries? You know, things like Mordenkainen's Magnificent Mansion, Liamon's Tiny Hut, stuff like that. Moreover, what about the Rod of Security? You could bring people into it and you'll be just fine. What about a Warlock's Genie Vessel? You could bring people into that. Maybe one person, but even so, you could still do so. It's like, well, would you consider those safe spaces? And in every instance, I couldn't come up with a correct answer, because to me, they feel like they should be safe spaces. They should be sanctuaries, because you're expending a resource to provide sanctuary for your party. But then I feel as if that kind of takes away from the survival aspect, because long rests just give you your spell slots back. So really, you're not losing anything. Spells like Tiny Hut or Magnificent Mansion, they don't lend themselves well to survival games. Same with like the food and water mechanics. They don't lend themselves well in 5th edition to survival games, because all you have to do is just take Goodberry. Sure, it doesn't fix your thirst problem, but that doesn't matter, because there's also Create Water. And also, if you have a decanter of Endless Water, it doesn't matter. Sure, your DM may make these things very scarce in a survival game, but even so, there's not really thirst mechanics, there's not really hunger mechanics in 5th edition. So it's very odd whenever I hear people saying, I'm going to run a survival D&D game and they're using 5th edition. I don't really think 5th edition or Dungeons & Dragons in general is well suited for survival games. You can certainly homebrew it to make it a survival game, but I don't think 5th edition or Dungeons & Dragons in general lends itself well mechanically to survival. Because remember, what are the 3 pillars? There's combat, exploration, and roleplay. So where does survival land in that? It would have to be an entire 4th pillar, because while exploration could be a umbrella term for survival, hunter, like hunting, gathering, whether that be actual food, water, or just general information, it doesn't fit well because there's no mechanics. As far as I'm aware, there are no negative benefits, like negative side effects, for people not drinking water. There's not negative effects for not eating food. And if there are, please leave me a comment down below and tell me where I could find this, because I've looked through the DMG and I've looked through the player's handbook. I haven't found anything on eating and drinking. The only things I found about it relate to how much food and how much water one would need to eat and drink in order to survive a day. So a typical adventurer would need at least 1 pound of food and 8 ounces of water, 8 ounces of water, like 1 cup of water, to survive a day. And that's it. There's nothing that says, well, if you go X amount of days without doing so, you're going to incur penalties. Maybe I skipped over it, but 5th edition as well as Dungeons & Dragons, I think, don't lend themselves well to survival mechanics. Because there's no incentivization to, I'm not sure if that's a word, but there's no incentive to gather food and water. There's no incentive to tell the players, if you don't do this, you're going to starve. Certainly you could start giving them points of exhaustion, but that just eventually leads to death. And depending on which system you're using, if you're using the 5th edition system or you're using the 1D&D system for exhaustion, one punishes you not enough, and the other one punishes you way too much. Because you gotta remember, the first tier of exhaustion just gives you disadvantage on all ability checks. Yeah, just all ability checks. So that's all forms of skill checks, and let's also not forget initiative. You have disadvantage on initiative because that's a skill check. Any sort of any sort of check that just says dexterity check or strength check, you have disadvantage on those. But then you get disadvantage, you get half speed. Then you get disadvantage on attack rolls and saving throws. Then your health becomes half, and then your speed drops to 0, then you just die. That sucks. Basically, anything after the first point of exhaustion is a slippery slope that leads to death. Meanwhile, 1D&D doesn't punish you enough because all it does is just give you a -1 to all D20 rolls. So attack rolls, saving throws, ability checks. And hell, if you have a weapon that has damage rolls, it could even give you a -1 to that, since it just says D20 rolls. At least as far as I was able to read. So if your DM for whatever reason gives you a D20 weapon, you have a -1 to that too. But no matter what, it's either not punishing enough and doesn't incentivize the players to do it, or it so heavily incentivizes it that your game is basically going to be nothing but we have to eat, we have to drink. It's not really a survival game if that's all you're doing. Survival, at least in my opinion, is an entire genre in which the idea is that you are just trying to survive. But surviving and having your entire campaign and pretty much every session just be, I go hunt animals, or I go pick grains or mushrooms or whatever, or I go find a river, and that's your entire 4-hour session. It's just you travel to one place, you guys need to eat, then do this. And then you guys travel to another place, you do this, and now you have to eat again. There's not a lot of time in between two portions. I think if you want to play a survival game, you should play something a little bit different. Like, just play a different system. Because D&D, in my opinion, doesn't lend itself well to survival. You can certainly homebrew it, but I wouldn't recommend it. Because there's a lot of things that you would really have to account for. And some tables may like that kind of stuff, and you can certainly run it there if you want to. But I know several tables, probably a vast majority of tables, don't really care about the food and water rations. They really don't. Much like how most people don't really care about encumbrance. Like, yeah, it's realistic, but who cares? It's not really a lot of fun for a lot of people. If your table enjoys that, please go right ahead. But I think if you want to play a survival style role-playing game, there's a lot better systems out there. I certainly don't have any examples of it, but I know that since we're pretty much in the silver or golden age of TTRPGs, there's a lot of games out there that you can most certainly look at, and they'll have mechanics and lore and all this on how to properly run survival. Anyway, that's just my small rant for today. Not a lot that I really have been thinking about. Just been kind of tired, but I'll get back to you guys with another rant soon, and hopefully we'll get to that homebrew review soon. But yeah.